Walking a path along the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road to the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and whether this manuscript has too many M-dashes. At a corner table by the fire are three people. One of them is arguing that each and every M-dash in his manuscript is not only precious, but also necessary. And that's me, Matthew Mellema. And welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Here at Believe to See, we explore the relationship between faith, art, and storytelling. Our goal is to help you connect the great story, the great stories, and our own stories in order to understand what it means to live with a Christian imagination. So, speaking for, I think, every artist in the Anselm Arts Guild, feedback has been on our minds a lot recently. You see, the Arts Guild is getting back together after a little bit of a regrouping hiatus, and we're all sharing our work with each other. And that means all of us are once again being called to both give and receive feedback on our stories. Now, if anybody in the audience has ever created a story, whether it's in the form of like a song, a picture, or a manuscript, then you've probably reached the point where you want to send the story out to other people. The story makes sense in your own head, but what about other heads? You know, you're so lost in the maze of your own imagination that you've lost your way entirely. Maybe another set of eyes, or 3 or 4 or 5, could help. But asking others for input can be treacherous. And we can probably all think of examples of people who give help that isn't all that helpful. Likewise, we've probably been in the position where we're giving the feedback that may not be that helpful. Is there a right and a wrong way to give feedback on someone else's story? How about to take that feedback on your own story? That is what we're here to discuss today. And I am joined here, first off, by Christina Brown. Christina, how are you doing?
I'm great.
Has feedback been on your mind a lot?
A bit, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you hesitated, which isn't what I was hoping for, but that still works.
I was thinking of whether it was my feedback or feedback for others, so I was trying to find the balance as to which one of those you were asking.
Okay. Well,
when someone asks me a question, my brain runs through specifics very quickly, but I definitely have the deer in the headlights look on my face.
Oh my.
My brain's working, but my deer in the headlights look is very much there.
Wow, I didn't mean to unearth so many layers there with that question, but I'm glad you're here to talk feedback with us. The other person is Evangeline Denmark. Evangeline, how do you feel about M-dashes?
I love M-dashes.
Mm-hmm.
You always sound disappointed when you say my name.
What?
You say Evangeline Denmark.
Evangeline Denmark.
You do.
Oh, man. Okay, let me try that again. We're also joined by Evangeline Denmark.
Much better.
Evangeline, M-dashes. They're the best, right?
They are the best. I'm totally in favor and definitely an overuser of M-dashes.
Okay, so I remember in college, I majored in English, which meant obviously all my friends sent their papers to me to review. So one of them, we'd just been talking about M-dashes to one of my writing classes, so I review his paper. I was like, ooh, I just added a bunch of M-dashes, like, yeah, this will be good. He gets his feedback from the professor. The first note, too many M-dashes.
Yep.
Oh, whoops.
It's his own fault for asking me to help.
Is it though?
Well, that'll be one of the things we want to get to here.
It tends to be the M-dash is the friend of the writer and the enemy of the editor, I think.
Oh, interesting.
That makes a lot of sense to me, because when you're a writer, it's a way to just change directions, but you feel like you're changing them really smoothly and coolly.
Mm-hmm.
But you're an editor, you can see all the M-dashes lined up on the page.
Yeah, and it looks not great. But yeah, it's a fun way to make your sentence, to include as much as you can in your sentence, and you're all excited because you're like, and this, but I put M-dashes in, so technically it's correct.
Right.
But it looks like, punctuation soup.
Let the record show, in case any future editors are reading this, I try to hold myself to 1 M-dash per paragraph.
Wow.
I try.
I thought you were going to say per page.
I did too.
I was about to really commend you.
Applaud you.
No friggin' way. I thought I was doing good with the paragraph.
I don't know. Now my standards seem, not that I really thought about it that much, but I'm like, okay, I bet I do more than one per page, but I don't think I do one per paragraph.
If you see my first drafts, see how many are in each paragraph, getting it down to one is kind of an accomplishment.
Yes, well, congratulations. It is hard.
Thank you. Thank you. So speaking of that, so I do want to talk about this because, like I mentioned earlier, the Guild is getting back together and we are all very excited about it. So the Guild, we've broken into 3 sub-guilds. So there's the writers, the visual artists, and the performance artists. And because each one of those, we've chopped the Guild into 3s. And now that means that there's small enough groups where you can actually give feedback. Like at the last meeting I went to, I read a section of a story I was writing, got feedback. Someone else read a first draft of a children's book she was writing. We all gave feedback. So this is definitely a thing we're all shooting for. And there are right ways and wrong ways to do this. I think I have done wrong things on pretty much all of these in the past, and most of us probably have. Mm-hmm. So I thought this would be good for us and for the listeners, because if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably in this process somewhere, right? You're in an author's group, you have something you're working on, you have someone sending something to you, and we just want to be able to do this well and do this in a way that helps others. So let's start with giving feedback. So, go ahead.
No, sorry. I'd love to throw in an editor's note for a second, though. You had mentioned that the guild was kind of split into 3 sub-guilds, and the way you kind of phrased it is, interestingly, a way we've been discussing. People have approached us and said, so which guild would I be a part of? And so it's like, wait, hold on. Maybe we need to clarify this a little bit more. We are still one guild of artists across all mediums. We still meet together as one guild, but we have subgroups within the guild.
So we're in the subgroup within the guild.
Correct.
Okay.
And we still all meet as a group, cross-pollination, etc. But we also meet with our more specific mediums to hone and feed each other with our own mediums and crafts. So I just wanted to throw that out there in case there are any listeners who are further confused, because I've definitely gotten that question
I'm sure
personally.
All the listeners are familiar with the concept of a sub-guild, right? I mean,
well, I was thinking subgroup, but
subgroup within the larger guild.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
I wanted to clarify. We've done some applications interviews recently, and I was surprised at how many questions on that topic I got. So I realized I might need to rework some of that wording to make it clear. So no fault to you. I just want to make sure the listeners understand what's going on.
Thank you for the feedback, and I hope
You're
that
welcome.
it will help me become a better podcast host in the future.
Absolutely, Matthew.
So as Christina just gave us the example, let's start with giving feedback. So again, both of you, me, we've had to give feedback on lots of people's projects, right? So what are the first things to keep in mind here? I think the first step here, Evangeline, would be your motives. So what should you keep in mind? What should all of us keep in mind in terms of the motives that we have going into giving feedback to somebody?
That's a good question. I think having a genuine desire to see the person that you're giving the feedback to flourish. However that is, if that's, and I think that being aware and sensitive to where they are is part of that process, because I might be able to give pretty strong feedback to a friend that I've known a very long time, a seasoned writer. I would feel comfortable saying, this right here does not work, and I know that would lead to her flourishing. Mm-hmm. Would I say that to a beginning writer? No. So I think keeping the specific person that you're giving feedback to front and center above everything else, even before you get to the project, is one of the most important ways that you can approach feedback.
Okay, so that's a good first step, recognizing who the person is that is sending you the feedback. So there's not only how well do I know them, but also are they an experienced writer? Or are they sort of a beginning writer? Does that jive with your experience, Christina? Anything you wanted to add to that?
I think that's absolutely wise. And I think there are people who do have a harder time being vulnerable, and especially when you know you're creating something from the depths of your being, that's very hard to turn over to someone else. And it is important to recognize how to give feedback that will encourage them to grow rather than wilt. I'm thinking of the seedling, right? Where do you nourish the roots? And where do you wilt with too much sun exposure?
Right.
Yeah, and I think this is the trickiest with someone who is just getting started, right? You know, whether they're a younger writer, or they're someone who's, just getting started in writing, because there I think it is important to sort of walk this line. At the one hand, if you're just like, oh, you're the best, you're a shining star, you're naturally the best, which it's probably where I would be tempted to just start off with, because I don't want to, hurt their feelings. Well, it's not helpful. And if they're just getting started, you might be encouraging them into some bad habits. But if you give all of the criticism that you have in your mind, like maybe you read it and you're like, this just isn't good. Well, is it not good because they'll never be a writer, or maybe it's just they're new? This is their first story. First story's bad, but if they keep at it, they'll get good eventually. That is a hard balance to strike, where you don't want to accidentally chase somebody away just because, as a human being, they're not going to be instantly great at it. But you also don't want to just puff them up in a way that won't help them either. I sigh and look over at Evangeline.
Do you need help? Can I help you? I think when I'm working with a new writer, you do. You go at that page and you're like, "Whoo boy," There's a lot here. I think, in that case, the first thing you want to do is look for something positive. The old sandwich thing, there's a reason, or the Oreo cookie, or there's a reason we have that metaphor.
Sandwich. I think the compliment sandwich. I think it's really good.
It is, and just in case listeners don't know, that's your bread is a compliment, and so you have, compliment, and then you have a little bit of criticism, which would be your whatever is the filling of your sandwich, and then another compliment on top. So you begin with compliment, you end with compliment. That way, it's a good way to approach just about anything, any kind of, hard topic or conversation that you need to have is, first, what is good. And then I think our tendency as experienced writers, as we go through somebody's, a newer writer's work, is, oh, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong. In that case, I think, and this is hard, you say, okay, I'm going to talk about one thing. I'm going to limit myself to, just this one thing, like they keep, slipping out of tense or whatever. They're using the wrong tense. And you're like, okay, I'm going to let all the commas go. I'm going to let the millions of adverbs that they used go. And I am going to just focus on, in this, section that I'm reading, helping them understand tense. You know what I mean? And that is because that's something they can process. If you give them everything all at once. I mean, I don't want somebody to give me everything all at once that I'm doing wrong.
That's as much as I'd like to hear it, some part of me is like, just be honest. The other part of me is like, but be honest in bits.
Right. Well, you can't take that in. You can't process. It's not going to be constructive to that person. So, and hopefully you're going to be in a relationship where you can, continue to work with them. And so there will be time for those other things.
Yeah, what you said, Christina, made me think of me and my golf swing. Listeners, you should know I hate golf, and I never want to play golf. But sometimes I have to play golf. And I was at the driving range with a friend of mine who's really good at golf. So I was like, hey, I know my swing's hideous. Can you just help me? So I drive a few shots, and I was like, okay, what can I do? And he's like, everything is wrong. I don't even know where to start. So, in that same way, I feel like you said, Evangeline, if you list all the things that are wrong with the story, even if they are genuinely wrong, that's not helpful to the person. Because when my friend said everything's wrong, it's like, well, what do I do with that?
I'm just going to leave. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Just go home.
Exactly. So, but if it's like, okay, well, let's work on, the position of your feet, or I'm terrible at golf, so I don't even know what to say. But it's like, oh, let's work at the tenses. That's a really good thing. So I like that, just practically.
I want to bring up, too, the concept of other mediums. Because we're talking a lot about writing, but there are different mediums, particularly visual arts, like painting or pottery are the two that kind of came to mind, but really any kind of really intense craft that you're working on, woodworking. I mean, there are a lot of things that you legitimately do have to give some serious feedback if they actually want the product they're trying to achieve. And sometimes I think that has to be a little bit more brutal. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's necessarily correct or not, but there are some very specific skills that have to be mastered correctly so that they can be built upon. Mm. And so I'm kind of thinking through like how as a visual artist or a craftsman would you give that kind of feedback, you know? Say your whole foundation here, you gotta redo the whole thing or you're not gonna get where you wanna go. And in some ways you could say that about sentence structure or whatever, like, hey, go back to take a grammar course. Like you could say something like that. Mm-hmm. But I almost feel like it's a little bit, kind of like you said, Evangeline, start with one thing, start with tenses. Kind of, you can kind of work backwards a bit if some writer comes and says, here's my piece, what do you think? Whereas there's some serious like foundational elements that you have to have right. And I think the thing that I was thinking about in our last guild meeting, one of our visual artists was talking about some painting that she'd done and how she was trained. This is a whole different thing, but when someone actually picks it up and they're willing to do the work, that's something else. Sometimes you just realize, oh, that person was just not ready. Because there are other people who say, I've been waiting to do this my whole life. Give it to me. And said teacher gives it to them. And they say, okay. And they go back and they do it. But I do think sometimes, too, when you're talking about feedback, sometimes teachers are the ones who can either make us or break us.
Mm-hmm. Well, we can really give, experienced and useful feedback. Like, I am uncomfortable giving feedback in a medium that I am not, a practitioner of.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So all I can say is, like how the piece affected me or what I notice about it. Usually I can only do positive feedback because I don't know how to phrase criticism when it's not my medium. So that's always a challenge. Do you guys have that? I mean, do you ever try to criticize a medium that is not your own? Like if a person asks you, we had that come up in our last guild meeting too. Somebody asked for feedback.
Yeah, they did.
And I was like, this is not my medium. So all I can say is, wow.
Right.
Yeah. I agree that I feel uncomfortable doing that. Mm-hmm. So someone will like bring a painting or like perform a song and my knee-jerk reaction is like, it's good. Mm-hmm. But when they ask for criticism in that context, it's basically like they want to hear what a non-expert thinks. Like, what impression does the painting have on a non-expert? What impression does a song have on a non-expert? We're talking to Terry Moon, a performing artist in the guild. She plays the violin. She's fantastic. About this and just about how, well, I don't know anything about music. What am I supposed to say? And she brought up, well, if the song is written correctly and performed correctly, you should feel specific things. So just telling us how it made you feel is important.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah. Okay. I tend to, because I've been privileged to just kind of be around in the room with Teresa Mahoney, who's a friend of the guild, and a singer-songwriter, and just to watch her do what she does, to me looks like magic. I'm like, how can anybody do this? What
Sorcery.
Are you doing right
That's
here? This
cool.
is, I can't even believe it. But I can respond with a feeling. Mm-hmm. So that's really good advice.
I think there is something too because I think there is so much, it's very important to me as a writer or a musician to hear from people who both know my craft and don't. Mm-hmm. And so I think there is kind of like you were saying there, even though the way you were talking, Matthew, and eventually you guys feel kind of like uncomfortable with giving that kind of feedback, there is something really needed. Like those people need us, right? The people who are not professionals, because basically I shouldn't say that's their audience ultimately, but we do, like with our art, we seek to bring in people who like don't necessarily know what we're trying to do
Yeah.
right away. Or they can't say, oh, that makes a good sentence. Why didn't they do that? Or, okay, I see that. No, you want that feeling. You want them to be touched by this in a way. So
I think there's very few artists who would be content if their art was only viewed or experienced by other artists.
By their
right?
by critics of their same craft. So I think that, like I love that Terry said that you do want them to encounter a feeling. So what I love to do is these people, and I actually don't get asked that often, so I don't know what that says. But, painter, what do you think? But I think it's really, what I do love to do is say, tell me, why did you do this? Why did you do this? And then they will often actually say things like, well, I actually didn't want to do it that way, but I did it this way because of this and this and this. And then that kind of leads into a deeper, oh, that's interesting. I see what you mean. Yeah, I agree. If I had done XYZ, I might not have XYZ as well. But I love this. And, anyway, it just kind of opens up, because I think we all want to be asked questions, I think that's a big part of feedback that maybe we haven't thought about yet, is we always think about giving feedback as like, here's my opinion. But asking questions is just as important, I think. And sometimes when the artists ask for our opinion, they often want us to ask, or sorry, I'm like getting my people mixed up. I'm like putting myself as the artist and not the artist. I'll just put myself, when I am asking for feedback on a piece that I write, I want people to give me their impressions of such and such. But I also really want them to say, I love this, why did you do it? Because I got this from it. So I think there's that too, is asking questions in giving feedback can often be really, really helpful, and it makes the artist feel seen.
It gives you an avenue into their process. Basically, it's, the old trick of asking your child when they bring you a picture that they've drawn and you have no idea what it is. Tell me about this.
Yep.
Only a little bit. A few stages beyond, because you do know what they have produced for you, and so
yes.
you're asking to be brought into their world and their process. And I think almost anybody likes to be asked that question.
I mean, everybody wants to be seen,
right? Exactly, like you said.
Yeah.
And that goes to figuring out. We talked about your motives as the person giving the feedback, but also figuring out the motives of the person bringing the art to you. Like if they're bringing something like, hey, here's a manuscript I'd like to eventually get published one day, versus this is just something I wrote for myself, it's a poem based on something that happened in my life a while back. Well, your feedback's probably going to be a lot different in that second case, because they're not looking... They probably don't want to hear you talk about enjambments and meter and everything. They, like you said, Christina, they probably just want to feel seen. So that's going to be very different than, oh, I'm applying to the University of Iowa Writers Workshop. What do you think of this poem that I'm putting for the application? Just knowing the different context. And to that point, I do think this is especially true when we're dealing with like kids or like teenagers, young people who are just getting started. I'm going to use a sports analogy here. I was listening to a podcast where they're talking about I have a point to this, I promise, the Norwegian athletic system. So Norway has about the same population as Minnesota, but they do really, really well at sports. Like the best men's soccer player in the world is Norwegian. The best women's soccer player in the world is Norwegian.
Oh, that's interesting.
One of the best beach volleyball teams in the world is Norwegian. The guy who just shattered the world record for the 2 mile is Norwegian. For their population size, they do really well. So the podcast was analyzing what they do. And one of the things is they make sure to let all the kids there try a whole bunch of different sports. And interestingly, they're very gentle with the kids. There's a sort of, stereotypical sports dad attitudes like, we're going to be tough on them. We're going to keep scores. We're going to be champions. Only winners get trophies. In Norway, there's a law that says if you give one kid a trophy, you need to give everybody a trophy. And it's not just to protect the kids' feelings. It's practical and pragmatic if you want to raise a generation of good athletes. When you're 8, you might be really bad at something, but it's because you're 8. Maybe that same kid, when they're 12 or 13 or 14 or 15, they'll go through that growth sprint, they'll be really good at it. So you don't want to chase away the 8-year-old from a sport they may be good at just because they're so young. And I think the same thing applies with young artists. When they, like for example, I gave a talk at a local middle school. Sarah, another guild writer, set it up because she works there. Thanks, Sarah. That was super nice of you. And it was super fun. Talked about dinosaurs. And afterwards, one of the girls comes up and she's talking about a story she's writing. Now, for me, my sole goal is I want to give her some guidance to get going. But I basically just want to support her because, like, write the story. Just do it. You know, there's no way of knowing whether this is something you have an aptitude for, whether it's not. So just get going now. Don't let me hold you back. So my attitude there is really just general guidelines, support.
Yeah.
And that's going to be different when you're dealing with someone who's older, again, like that. But especially when folks are young or brand new, I'd say err on the side of generosity and encouragement.
Yes, I think that's a good
I think
word
it is.
to live
It's
by.
like, I mean, not to be, the person that goes back to the gardening, examples, but like a sapling, right? You're not going to like throw like your entire watering bucket on it at once. You're going to give it little supplements, little encouragements, right? Little drips to its roots to soak up. You're not going to drown it in what it actually will need eventually. It will need all that water, and once it grows, usually, particularly if you're in Colorado, it does need an entire gallon of water at once. But you're not going to do that to a seedling or a sapling. So I think that's interesting that you... I agree with that. I think we just remember tenderness and think of yourself as a tender youngling. And then you'll probably have some guides to go by.
Yeah. So that's sort of what we're keeping in mind. I think we've been focusing on folks who are either young or just getting started. So that's sort of one level. Let's look at giving feedback to folks who are maybe beyond that. Okay, so they're like intermediate or expert writers. They're folks who know what they're doing, and we can sort of be a little bit more forthright with them. Again, like maybe they're asking us like, hey, here's my agent query letter. Like this legit has to be good. What do I do? Or like, here's a manuscript. I want it to get published someday. What do I do? So there, just to sort of kick things off, I do think you still need to keep those motivations, right? Where you can veer either into being too nice or too not nice. Evangeline, would you care to put some to too not nice?
Oh, I'm supposed to take the too not nice?
Yeah, did I give you enough to go on?
If you start by judging Matt's work, you'll be fine.
Oh, I did read Matt's work. I read
That's
one
right.
of Matt's, and I was pretty not mean, but honest about you had an introduction.
Oh yeah.
You remember I was the reason that you took out your introduction, and I felt like maybe I had been too. I think I just asked, what does this have to do with the rest of the story?
No, that's actually a good example. So again, I'm at that stage where I wasn't just looking for people to say nice things, right? It's like, hey, I'm serious about this book. I'd like to get it published. Really tell me. So at the beginning, I had sort of this introduction. It was like a frame story. So like I set up the frame of the story, and I really liked it.
It was really good.
But Evangeline pointed out, I think correctly, it's like, hey, you can't have this if you're actually going to get it published. So I thought about it, and I realized you were correct. It was, again, if I was just writing for me, I would have kept it. But I wasn't. I wanted it to go out. So I took your advice, and I still have that section, but now I'm planning on using it as like an ebook or something that sort of goes along with it. So I still have it, just not in the main part of the book.
Yeah, I mean, and you can always encourage people, and that's something that I do too, is, there's that saying, kill your darlings, which means, brutally take out things, even if you love them. And I just keep another document and plop them in there, and it just eases the pain.
See,
and
that's
you
funny,
never know
though.
what you're going to use, how you're going to use it later.
Yep, deleted scenes.
Yep.
Deleted scenes. See, I keep thinking like that's such a lucky thing that a lot of writers, have these days. Like, if we all wrote by hand and we could toss things into the fire, maybe we'd be goners. Like, we would have that. But I think of, like, I was telling my daughter the other day, because she's really getting into art. She's 5. and she just loves art. She just wants a marker or a pencil in her hand all day, and it's adorable. But so she's getting very particular, and so perfectionist I probably would not say, because I think she just sees something beautiful in her head and she just keeps wanting to be better than she is, and I get that. But she worked so hard. She even took one of my old drawing books and she worked on this piece of paper of dancers for like an hour. And then I just hear these like growls and then screams. And then she comes in, she knocks on the door, and Brian and I are talking, and she just has this look on her face. And then she comes in tears, and she's just, and we said, well, what's wrong, honey? And I thought she was going to say, I couldn't do it, but she said, well, I was so angry that I cut my paper and I scribbled all over my beautiful drawing.
Aww.
It was right there where I saw, yes, like I get this, but that's also not something you can come back from. You scribble, that is, unless you repaint the whole thing or redraw, whatever. But I told her, I was like, you know what? Like, that's partly how we learn. And, there were a lot of famous artists who would paint over their entire canvas. Yeah.
Right. And think of all the like burned manuscripts out
Yes,
there.
exactly.
And that does, there's something really cathartic about, thinking about
At one point,
that.
Harper Lee was so frustrated with her To Kill a Mockingbird manuscript, she'd throw all the pages out of a window.
Yeah.
Yep.
Probably some of those are retrievable, but you're talking about
not quite the same effect throwing your laptop out the window. You're just like you're just gonna be really mad at yourself.
Just be much more cathartic with the stacks of paper.
Yes.
They're like all fluttering.
Yes, maybe we just need to print out our manuscripts just for that.
But then the temper tantrum's over, so you might
I know, you have to sit there and wait for the printer to do it. Yeah, and then
an hour.
Right.
Great, I'm not even mad anymore, so I don't even want to do it. But
stinks.
But to that point, Christina, that does sort of underscore why it is important, even if you are an experienced artist, even if you know what you're doing, it's still important to keep the proper motives there. And again, you can go one of two directions. I have a tendency with some folks to just be too nice, because again, it's like, oh man, I don't want to get Evangeline mad at me, so I'm just going to say that her manuscript's the best thing ever. I'm not going to point anything out.
You better.
Yeah, but presumably, that it wouldn't be why you send me the manuscript, right? You can find other people to just tell you that your manuscript's awesome. You would probably send it to us to be like, hey, help me make it better. And again, that would be essentially putting my own fear of discomfort ahead of your
I like that.
desire to have a good manuscript. So
yeah,
that's so interesting. I'm really honing in on what you said there, Matt, because that is a tough one. Where are you putting, in that whole thought process even, where are you putting yourself first? I don't want her to be mad at me. And where are you putting her? I don't want her to be upset. Because even there, like, that's a double-edged, like, thought process. You're like, well, is that fear more for me or for her? Do I care more about her feelings or more about her being mad at me? And I found that personally. So that's interesting you say that, because when you first started talking about that, I was like, oh, he doesn't want his friend mad at him. And it's like, oh wait, maybe he doesn't want to feel mad at.
I don't want
he doesn't want someone to be mad at him.
I don't want anyone mad at me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So is that a good reason not to give the feedback that's needed? I wanted to put in, I don't know if this is a good time for this, so stop me, Matt, if it is, but on that topic, I tend to be the opposite. And I don't know why, so I actually kind of wanted to ask you guys if you had an opinion on this, because when I am asked for feedback, or to give feedback, I tend to be more harsh than I want to. But I do it out of sincere affection and belief in said person. And I always come back and look at either the email it was or whatever the, edited document was, and I say, I wonder if that was a little harsh. But I don't do it. I do it the way I want someone to do it to me, basically. When someone reviews something that I wrote and they come back with some fluffy words and nothing negative, I'm like, okay, why are you being so nice to me?
You're
That's
not
not what I
You're
wanted.
not telling the truth.
You're not telling the truth. And so
What are you hiding from me?
I think that's it. And I think maybe when my writing career, I put it in air quotes, but when it first started, my godfather was the one who believed in me. Well, I shouldn't say my parents didn't, but he was a writer, so he kind of got things, and he was the one who really was encouraging me. But he started me out. So my very first exposure to feedback was him saying, now, Christina, I will most definitely give you feedback on anything you send me, as long as you let me say whatever I want. Because I'm not going to be nice just for being nice. I will say what I see, and I believe in you, and if I don't like it, I will tell you, and I will tell you why. Are you okay with that? And I love that from the very first second. And so that was exactly what I needed and what I wanted. Mm-hmm. And did a couple of those feedbacks come back and I was crushed? Yeah, for a bit. But I also knew I could completely trust his praise. Mm-hmm. And so when he said, wow, this was incredible, either this paragraph or this poem or this piece or whatever it was, I knew he was honest. And so I think that's my approach. But now I think when I give feedback, I keep thinking, oh, well, surely someone will want that same honesty. And surely someone will know that when I give this feedback, it's because I believe in them and I want, But I was just kind of curious if you guys ever land in that space where you think you're giving the feedback that somebody needs and you think you're being sensitive, and all of a sudden you think, oh, wait, I'm being more honest than sensitive. The sensitivity is all in my own head, or it's in my understanding of what they think or what they need. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
I think the important thing when you really are moving into a deeper, more advanced level of critique is trust. Mm-hmm. And, I would not recommend doing that level of critique with someone that you don't trust.
Yeah.
Because, you talked about, you trusted your godfather. Yeah. The critique, sorry, I can't talk. The critique groups that I've been in that have been the most helpful, it takes a while to ramp up, but mm-hmm. it has been in established working relationships and friendships, where there was safety and the person well enough to know mm-hmm. how they're going to take it and mm-hmm. what they can take. And that's, I think, probably the most valuable thing when it comes to really tearing something apart in the best way.
In the best way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do want to talk about tearing something apart in the best way. But first, let's sort of take a sort of half step at tearing something apart for the wrong reasons, which I think we've probably all experienced this. Again, anyone who's been to critique group has seen this happen, where there seems to be that person, maybe some of us have been that person at some point, where you get the feeling that the editing process is an excuse for them to show off how smart they are and how they can tear everything apart.
Yeah.
It's like, this doesn't work for this pseudo-intellectual reason. This doesn't work for this pseudo-intellectual reason. Yeah. And it's very easy to do that without even meaning to. Because, I will say just for me, there are times when it's like, well, I'm the English major here. I need to say something, right? So it's like, oh, I haven't made a note in a page and a half. Here's something wrong. Or, maybe something about the person writing just kind of irritates you and you have an axe to grind or that. There's all sorts of reasons to do that for the wrong reason. Evangeline, I'm guessing with your critique group experience, you have seen this in the wild.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I have. Yeah, like you said, I think everybody's been on the receiving end. I'm just remembering
of a person like that.
Of someone who just is a know-it-all.
A know-it-all. Yeah,
they're just a know-it-all, and they want to show off. And that's a really difficult, relationship to navigate. And I think those, when you have a person like that in a critique group, that group doesn't last very long because it just does not work. It just does not jive. But I'm trying to think of times, if I've done that, I know that, I was asked to endorse a book once and I didn't love the person's writing. but I also had like a fundamental disagreement with like the premise of the book. So, you know, I shouldn't endorse it then. That's not okay. But I wondered if my fundamental disagreement with the premise of the book kind of colored my judgment on the person's writing. So I think that's another way is like, you know, like I just disagree with this person, so I'm not going to like whatever they say. And that's another trap that kind of comes up, right, that you can fall into in a critique group.
Yeah, it's very easy to look at like this paradigm of like the jerk know-it-all critiquer, right?
Right.
So that sort of, it seems like for most of us that's an easy thing to avoid. But there's all these sub things that are a lot harder to avoid.
Yeah, tell us. What do you think?
Yeah, so like Evangeline said, it's like, I don't like this, but do I not like it because I just objectively don't think it's good? Or it's like, oh, like the premise I don't like, and it might be different from the writing. Or, you know, like, I've been in critique groups or like in college classes with like people who kind of, they just rub me the wrong way. It's like there's something about the writing that I just don't care for. So then maybe that means I'm going to be a little bit harsher than I need to, or that I'm picking out things that don't need to be picked out. And again, that sort of thing is an easy trap to fall into.
What about the jealousy factor?
Yeah, that could be it too.
Yeah. Who hasn't been there?
Yeah.
Like, dang it, this person's good. Yeah.
Yep. And again, that's one of those things. It's a normal human thing to experience, and it's very normal to be like, oh, this person thinks they're so fancy with their, contract, or like, oh, they got posted in this magazine. Well, I'll show them. Page will bleed red ink.
I'm more likely to just not say anything and go like sulk in a corner. Why is she so good at this? Yeah, so mature.
Yeah, but so now let's sort of transition to the other side, right? Where let's assume you are doing it for the right reasons, right? You're legitimately trying to help this person. You found some things that are wrong with the manuscript or whatever artwork, and you really want to help by pointing them out. What's the best way to do it so that it doesn't come across the wrong way? Like just like practical strategies to be like, hey, you don't want to needlessly offend them. You don't want to like burn the bridge, but you do want to actually help them because you found a mistake.
One of the things that I will ask for when I'm asking for criticism and then will also give is just noting when I was drawn out of the story or drawn out of the piece, whatever it is, because that's a good way to get into talking about if it's word choice, if it's unclear, whatever, you can say right here, I was having trouble connecting with your story. It pulled me out of the story because I was thinking about this. Why did you choose that word? I was thinking about, wait a minute, she was just sitting down on the bench, but now she's, standing on the path and I'm confused and I'm pulled out of the story. So when I ask people to read for me or whatever, I say, please tell me where you were pulled out of the story. And that's another, that's a way that I use to respond to somebody, because it's not, it's not attacking, it's not negative, it's honest, but it's useful, I think.
It's also a great way to ask someone who is not necessarily a part of your medium.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So I just want someone like you to enjoy my story. Would you be willing to read this manuscript and tell me where do you not feel moved by this story? What takes you out of where I'm trying to get?
Yeah, and I think a couple other things that are helpful. Like some of the things I do, I don't know if this is helpful or not, it's just what I try to do. I first of all, I try to make it very clear to the person, like, hey, these are my opinions. I could be wrong. So like, seriously, if you want to ignore any or all of it, go for it, right? Because there are times when I have looked at friends' manuscripts and afterwards like, maybe I was just sort of trying to like impose my style on their style, right?
Yeah, that's always gotta be watch out for that, yeah.
So that's just something I try to be cognizant of. And then second, I
think as a receiver of feedback, you have to make sure that you're listening to that too, right? Are they trying to, like, do they just not think like this, or are they legitimately saying your voice is not working here? And that's tricky too.
That is tricky. Yeah.
You know what would be better than your voice?
Yeah.
My voice.
My voice. Ooh, not a good way to.
But also, like, maybe this is just me, like, I don't know, overthinking it. But even in, like, the margin notes that I type in, I usually try to phrase, like, as a question. It's like, seems a little wordy here. Maybe take out some of the adjectives instead of, like, eliminate adjectives.
Or just cross them out in red, like scribble over the no adjectives. Yeah, don't do that.
And again, I try to convey, I don't think there's any magic words or phrases here. It's like, try to convey, I'm doing this because I'm trying to implement your voice. I could be making mistakes here, so just keep that in mind and take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. So with that said now, I want to touch briefly on what to do when you are receiving feedback. So again, you're the one with the manuscript, and again, let's say for our purposes here, you actually want to go somewhere with it.
Or we can talk. Can we talk about like visual arts too?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Just making sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
a piece of pottery that you want in an exhibit or something.
Yeah, it's something that it's not just for you. It's something that you want actually out in the world, and you take it seriously. I think there are right ways and wrong ways to receive the feedback and solicit the feedback. So let's start off. So the first step, like, when you have a work, how do you know it's ready to send out to other sets of eyes to look at, Evangeline?
When you're irritated with it, when everything about it, when you cannot get through the millionth time that you've reread it, and you just you take a word out and you put it back in, and then you take it out again and then you put it back in. Send the dang thing off to someone else, because you are beyond objectivity at that point.
That's interesting. So it almost sounds like your strategy then is you work it as much as you possibly can before you send it out to others.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. It depends on the project. It depends upon the group. Like if you're doing a weekly or monthly critique group, you may not have that option. When you're looking for a beta reader or you're presenting a project more as a whole, then I do it, I get it as far as I can. And then, when I know that I have lost objectivity.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point, because you do have that. Where are the stages of criticism? Is this, like you said, beta reader or beta reader? Wow, I talk too fast. I can't use syllables.
Beta Rita is a sci-fi hero.
I knew that shit. She is.
Beta Rita.
Beta Rita.
But
but for example, like if you were to, I feel like there are, again, I know I keep harping on the other mediums, but I just keep thinking about it because this is interesting. I haven't thought about what would you do if you were getting your pottery ready for a show. You work it to the best you can, but do you just submit it for entry and hope, or is there a part of the process where you can find someone else and say, is this good enough to submit, or do I need to go all the way back to the ground, right? Or to the starting wheel. Pottery wheel, starting wheel.
Oh, look at you. Look at you.
The spinner's
you have
wheel.
This common motif. but to that point,
just to your question.
I have different levels of sort of sharing that I have with my work. I kind of have this, it's not official, but it's kind of like my de facto thing that I do. I don't tell anybody about the story, not even the premise, until I have a first draft and I've gone over with the second draft to polish.
Does that mean a novel too? Would that be?
Yeah.
Okay.
I write middle grade novels, so they're shorter, but
still, wow, that's
just because I kind of want. I don't think this could be a whole nother podcast episode, but I kind of want to work it all out on my own. I also don't want to put it out in the world before I'm even sure it'll work, because I feel like once you tell people about an idea, it becomes more official. But if you don't tell someone, you can work on it, just scrap it, it's not going to work. So I don't know, it kind of makes me feel cool. It's I have a book and I didn't tell anyone about it, but here it is. So there's a book I've been working on and I have it all outlined. I've done quite a bit of world building and I have most of the first draft done. I have not told anybody a single thing about the book.
Well, you're telling us now.
I know, it's like...
I'm not telling you anything about...
Well, we know it exists.
You know it exists. That's it.
There's probably dinosaurs.
There's actually not.
I was actually going to say, I bet there's not in this one.
Dinosaurs.
I'm not
Okay,
gonna tell you,
it exists.
Bigfoot. It's Bigfoot.
I've said too much already. But for me, I don't know. I don't even know if that's a thing that does anything or if it's just sort of my own little quirk. But once I have the second draft, I feel like I'm ready to send it out to like trusted circle, but even then it's not really like the serious editors.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't send it out to either of you two, but I might send it out to like...
Serious editors.
You guys are serious. Yes, I take your work seriously. But I'd send it out to my mom, because I know my mom's going to love everything right. Or I'd send it out to Danielle, and Danielle will give me feedback. But, you know, she's biased. So.
She also has to live with you. So
exactly.
Yeah, she knows.
Then once I get that, you know, like the Danielle level feedback, then maybe I'll do a few more drafts and send it out to the more serious people. So I kind of have levels. There's not telling anyone. Then there's send it out to like friends and family. Then after that, I'd send it out to other writers.
I think that is a quirk. I mean, I shouldn't say, no, sorry, not a quirk. But no, I think that is a personal approach, because I know there are other people, and sometimes I'm one of them, who wants to do something so badly, but keeps talking herself out of it until she actually says to somebody in a moment of vulnerability, oh, I really want to do this. And the person says, well, why the heck aren't you? And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, wait. And so then they kind of can be accountability buddy. That kind of sounds lame. But they kind of can be, right? You have that point where someone has to be there to keep you going and say, did you write your, one paragraph this week? Awesome. You want to send it? Okay, if you don't, cool. But you do sometimes need that. And then, of course, but yeah, I think that might be just a different approach. If we're talking about when to kind of ask for help or feedback, I think some people need it from the very get-go, which is why I think if you have an artist friend, be attentive to their heart, be attentive to their yearnings and what they're wanting and hoping to create and feeling, and maybe you will unmine some of the biggest treasures yet.
You are absolutely right. I do think my not telling anyone about the work until the second draft is a quirk.
Well, I think other people do it too.
But I do feel pretty strongly like you shouldn't send it out for other people to review. Like I tried reading portions of a first draft before, and just it was actually at an Ansel meeting. It was one of those things where it's like,
funny.
We needed stuff. It's like, does anyone else have anything to share? So I was like, okay, here's a first draft of something.
Oh, funny.
And everyone was super nice.
Was I there?
You may have been. It was during the pandemic, so it was over Zoom.
Okay.
But one of the people said, it was a very kind person, they're like, wow, you doing that was very brave.
Oh.
So it's like, I don't think I'm going to share first drafts again for a bit. But again, it's not ready at that point. Like, there's no one can give useful feedback at that point. You need to put a certain amount of work in before people could give useful feedback.
I have to share this. Okay, so I'm not going to say who it was, and it was a while ago. But I was about to read, and one of the people in attendance said, does anyone have any tips for keeping your mind from wandering while the writers are reading? And I'm like, ow! They had no intention of telling you you're boring as heck.
Oh, no.
But that's how it came across.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Right.
How far for the territory, right?
It's kind of along your
Exactly.
That was brave comment. You're like, all right, brutal honesty without them even realizing they've been brutally honest.
But that gets to another, to the point of good ways to respond to criticism, because again, I do think there are two equal and opposite mistakes people can make. And again, I've seen people make both mistakes. One is to become defensive. It's like anyone attacking their baby. It's like the mama or papa bear comes out, right? Like they assume, take it as a personal attack. They get all offended, blah, blah, blah. You don't get it. Then there's the other mistake, which is the mistake I'll admit I'm more prone to make, where you're just too accepting of criticism.
Well, you got rid of your entire beginning portion of your novel just because I said
because
this
of the negative things Evangeline said about me.
And it really was good. I remember
it. Don't worry, I'm getting back to it. But for me, I have had things where I think it's because for a while I worked as a clerk for a judge right out of law school. And when you're helping a judge write an opinion and they want to make a change, you make the change. Because even if I drafted the opinions, it's like, well, it's judge's opinion, not mine. They know better. And even if they're wrong, it's not my place to say anything. So I think I kind of carried that mindset with me for a while.
Yeah.
It's like, well, whoever's reviewing this probably knows better, so I'll make the change without even thinking about it. That's not helpful. And I really did realize this with one set of criticism where it's pretty sweeping. And I was so after the first little shock wears off, I was like, I think they're wrong. It's like I'm not being a jerk. I don't think you get what I was going for right here.
Yeah.
So I took some things, but got rid of others. Whereas I think other people have the tendency to get the defenses up right away. I'm guessing you've seen both examples too, Evangeline.
I have, and I think I've felt both ways as well.
Yeah.
Done both. And that just takes time to develop your maturity and to know your own voice. So when someone says, I have a good friend who's an accomplished writer, and I know when she makes comments that are just a voice thing, she wouldn't say it that way. We have different styles, and and she doesn't mean it as a harsh criticism. It's just the way that she would do it, and so it's just becoming comfortable and aware of your own voice and how you want to do things.
Yeah, and another thing is the trust factor, right? We talk about the trust factor when you're giving the criticism, also
when you're
receiving. Like the one I was just talking about, whereas I eventually got to a point where I was like, I don't think you get it. It was someone who was an accomplished writer, like they're published, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't know them very well, and looking back, I was like, not someone I'd go to again, right? Nothing against them, it just wasn't a good fit. Whereas, again, for you, Evangeline, I did know you well at that point, so I was like, okay, I will take what she says that carries more weight for me. And I think that is helpful. Is it someone who you trust actually has your best interest in mind, or is it someone who maybe showing off or just doesn't get your voice or, some other thing?
Yeah.
And weeding through that can be tricky because, again, you're kind of on the knife's edge between being too defensive and rejecting fair criticism or being too compliant and accepting bad criticism.
Yeah. And not to put too fine a point on it, but there is goodness to praying through it as oneself, either as the person getting feedback or giving it. I think I often forget, I'm not writing this on my own, So especially obviously when giving criticism, it's important to sort of pray through it before you shoot it off or whatever. But I think even just in kind of like when you said, Matt, when you just kind of got that really harsh, wait a second. I've had to do times where people, that's the thing too, we haven't touched on this and I know we're kind of running low on time, but when you have someone you trust so much that said something so negative that it crushed you as feedback and you really didn't see it coming. And I think that's me personally when I have to remember, wait a second, I need to take this back to the Lord first of all, because you start realizing, I don't know, you put your stock in what men think of you and blah, blah, blah. And you have to remember, wait, who, is it really the Lord that I believe is kind of commissioning my work and me to give, am I giving my work first to God? And is that my audience? And then, giving of that to others. Where am I really finding my value as an artist? And I think that can be difficult, and I think that can only be answered through prayer, and sometimes taking it to a second person, saying, "Hey, I was totally crushed. Do you see it too, or is it just
Yeah.
Is this something I need to start praying about and take back? Yeah. I don't know."
And part of that is being anchored before you take the criticism, because it's that sort of criticism is genuinely really crushing when it happens. But then you can always, it's very easy to spiral. It's like,
it is.
Oh, this criticism says this work's no good. I'm no good. I'm the worst. Blah, 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 blah. But it's like, okay, let's take a step back here and look at it.
Yeah.
Maybe this person is wrong. Maybe this person is right, but it's about this project. Like, maybe this project's bad, but that doesn't mean I'm bad as an artist. It takes... it's very hard to do. And I know for me, I am really good at saying the right things ahead of time. But then when it happens, you pitch something, it gets rejected, which happens all the time.
Yeah.
It's easy just to have the feelings well up nonetheless. So it just takes work.
It hits you like a Mack truck sometimes when you don't even expect it. I've given my work to people and I didn't realize how badly I wanted it to resonate with them, and when it didn't, and they said some, whatever line it was that they said really hit me so hard. And that's kind of where I meant, like Matt, where you said, like, where you have to find that point of stability as someone receiving, like, where am I certain that this is the work that I am called to do, the work that I want to do, the work that I still do feel confident in, and where do I need to say, okay, this person doesn't quite get it, and where do I need to say, wow, I missed the mark here. I need to really reconsider some things. So, but that's kind of where my comment was going with that, is sometimes when you have that, you just kind of forget. I need to actually step back, say a prayer, be like, all right, Lord, where is this really supposed to go, and who am I really listening to here? Because, And,
the worst of the worst, like, well, you get so far with a project and then you have to abandon it, which, because someone has given you the ultimate no. Yes. And it is so painful, and you just, like, give yourself the room for it to hurt. But, that even though it feels like the final no, you don't know that it will be. That project could come around again in the future.
Or
and also, there is work and there is creation and there is art after that valley, after that experience. And you have to, and it, like, in the middle of it, you're like, I'm never gonna run again. And you want to print it out and burn it in your fireplace. It feels devastating.
Throw it out the window, laptop and all.
Yeah, exactly, laptop and all, yeah. But, every time there comes a point where you're like, oh, hey, I think I could write again. And it's sort of like out of the blue, and you're like, oh, yeah. So even, like, the worst of the worst. Yeah. But then, of course, there's, getting skewered online. That's pretty bad, too.
Oh, I bet. Oh, man, I have not gotten to that point.
Yeah. But then again, like, what you have to do is, remind yourself, this is this person's opinion. And chances are there's somebody who says the exact opposite.
Yep.
And that is also their opinion. So probably neither of them is entirely correct.
Well, yeah. If it's someone making a negative comment online, they're probably the one who's incorrect. Let's be real. Let's be real. But yeah, I think that's a good place to end it on, Evangeline. It's just keeping in mind that there are going to be ebbs and flows to everything. Even really talented artists sometimes have projects that don't work out for whatever reason, and that's normal. You should have a mindset of growth the whole time, where it's not, oh, I failed here. It's like, okay, this didn't pan out the way I wanted, but I learned these things, got this experience. Now I'm better for the next project. Keep going that way. All right. Well, thank you both for this conversation. And if you have any feedback on how I did as a host, I'm all ears for that. But as the rest of you can probably figure out, things are winding down at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. The fire's down to embers, the customers are trundling home, and you've polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. If you have like 28 and a half seconds or so to spare, please rate and review the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.